questions. And it was a very interesting conference. It was a great 3 days. And while I was there, I met Tamar Sacerdoti, who is with an Israeli consultant firm called Robus.
Yes.
Tamar has a political science degree and a law degree from the IDC, which is the Interdisciplinary Center located in Herzliya, just outside of Tel Aviv. Robus, as I understand, which she's going to tell us more, advises Israeli firms on marketing. And Robus, and this is why I thought it would be interesting for us, Robus also acts as a source of information and get-together between Israeli tech firms and European, and I guess American firms looking to penetrate or establish different collaborative ventures with law firms. So Israel, Europe, Israel, the United States. And I know we've talked for many years about possibly thinking of an Israeli member or at least reaching out to Israeli law firms and Israeli companies. So when Tamar told me what she does and what Robus does, I thought it would be, thanks to Martin who accepted the proposal, I thought it would be interesting for Tamar to come and give us a speech, a talk about what the Israeli legal market looks like, specifically with reference to law firms and more specifically with respect to tech law firms. You've got around this table most European jurisdictions.
Okay.
You have all the field Fisher offices, and we're now more and more numerous. And we have a number of other firms from the Iberian Peninsula, from Central Europe, from Scandinavia as well. So I think I'll shut up and give you the floor, but thank you for agreeing to come. And I think whatever you tell us is going to be incredibly interesting. So thanks again.
So, in the meantime, sorry. In the meantime, while it's getting up, I can really blame Christopher for the 4 p.m. on a Friday. So I tried to make it as interesting as possible. So please feel free to ask questions or to make any sorts of comments throughout. So it's more of a discourse than just a presentation. And like Christopher said, my name is Tamar Sacerdoti. I'm the head of the foreign law firms at Robus, and we were established about 7 years ago by an attorney named Zohar Fisher, who worked at one of the top law firms in Israel, Ecomlex, and he decided to go into marketing instead of law. And basically what we do is we help mostly Israeli law firms, but I specifically deal with foreign law firms really trying to make their first few steps into the Israeli market. So I just came from a few days in London where I was meeting clients as well, so it was very convenient and nice to be here, and thank you all for having me again. It's a pleasure. It's my first time in Helsinki, and so far the food has been quite good. And we haven't seen snow in a long time, so it was nice yesterday. I know that you're not appreciating it, but I liked it. So before we begin, really I'm just more curious to know than anything else, whenever we think about Israel, when you think about Israel and specifically the tech sector, what comes to mind as foreign law firms? Startups? Okay.
Well, actually just a center for technology companies, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Security related.
Yeah.
Security related, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Very international.
Very international.
Very tied into Europe, America, and the rest of the world.
Right, which is basically why I'm here.
Startups in the military.
Yeah. We'll be talking a lot about that as well. So really before I try and respond and give some sort of framework into what the really Israeli market is about, I've prepared a few numbers for you to try and grasp really what the market is all about. So there are 94 Israeli companies listed on NASDAQ with a market cap of $70 billion, which is more exciting to look at if you look at the per capita. So you have, in Israel it's nearly $9,000 per capita, and in Europe it's only $6,000, all of Europe together. I didn't put the American number there because it kind of shoots us out of the water, but they're really the only ones that are higher than Israel. These 4 startups alone are worth more than $17 billion. Waze is a company that we'll talk about that was sold for, over $1 billion. Mobileye was just sold a few weeks ago for $13 billion. Proportionately, Israel has the largest number of startups in the world, and in absolute terms, they're only the second after Silicon Valley. In 2016, Israel produced 114 tech exit deals that were worth over $10 billion. And also last year, Israel attracted over $11 billion of foreign investment, an important figure that we'll come back to a few times during the presentation itself. There are nearly 300 R&D centers in Israel, and most of them are Fortune 500 companies. And what's really exciting about all the numbers that I just gave you is that we're only 8 million people. So I could really keep going, but I really hope that you kind of got the gist of the numbers, and it's really never ending. And Israel, just to show it has so much capital flow, has so many people coming in, coming out, and it's actually quite amazing to see. And before I show you really how Israel got to the numbers that it got to, I kind of want to start with a few parting words, because if you remember what I'm going to talk about in the next minute, I think I did my job. So it's this word, this phrase, the Israeli ecosystem. That what's going on in Israel, it's all a part of the atmosphere. It's the corporate culture, it's the surroundings, it's the education, and it granted what Israel is now infamously called the startup nation. And it's really important to try and understand that. In order to understand the Israeli ecosystem, it's easier to understand what the startup market and the technology market is like, and also how to really be a part of it. And what's really quite interesting, more than anything else, is that Israel just celebrated her 69th birthday a few weeks ago, and really only started developing the technology sector 30 years ago. So we're quite new and young. But what's almost more important to talk about, it's not that Israel has better technology workers, or they're smarter or have better engineers than anyone else in the world. But somehow Israel still has got to the point that she's gotten to, that one of the first things that comes into your mind when you hear Israel is startups. It's an international hub for startups. So we're going to today really try and focus on why that has become and why Israel is so special in that regard. So in preparation for this presentation, I spoke with an Israeli entrepreneur who was one of the founders of Waze. I don't know if some of you have heard of it. I realized that in Finland you don't use it because you have to stay loyal to Nokia and their maps, but most of the world uses it. It's a travel navigation application that really changed the way that people commute to work, because it uses information while you're driving to try and deviate others from traffic. And like I said, it was sold about 2 years ago for over $1 billion to Google, and it was only created in 2009. So I spoke with one of the founders of Waze, and he said that really there's 5 pillars that hold up the Israeli startup ecosystem. And the first one, which is exactly like what you were saying before, is the military. It's the Israeli Defense Force. Because at the age of 18, I understand there's also a mandatory conscription here in Finland as well for males, but that's only half a year. So in Israel, at the age of 18, both men and women go to the military, men for 3 and women for 2. And so as opposed to going to university or traveling for a year or whatnot, Israelis at the age of 18 go into the military. But it's really not just any other military, as maybe what you hear in the media, but generally speaking, the tech units in the military are some of the best in the world. They get prizes every year for their work that they do, which isn't really heard throughout much of the world because a lot of the units are classified themselves and the work can't be shown, but they really are some of the best units in the world. And I don't know if you've heard of the book Startup Nation by 2 American authors who really talk about why Israel has gotten to the point that it's gotten to in regards to technology. And it's quite recommended, by the way. But they say that the experience that Israelis get in the military is quite different, or maybe not different, but it really changes them and how they work later on. It really changes them as a human being. So just a few examples, for instance. Teamwork, and perseverance and trying to create creative solutions to difficult problems and working under extreme pressure. And they're things that really help Israeli developers later on, so when they're 28, they have Israeli coders have incredible experience from their time here in the military. Now, secondly, and it's a bit blurry, but secondly, what's really important as well is that since the 1980s, the Israeli government has provided an immense amount of assistance to Israeli startups. So it started in the 1980s for the reason that Israel wanted to bring as many foreign investments as possible, because they realized that in order to develop the technology sector, Israel just didn't have enough money. So they gave a lot of tax breaks to foreign investors. And that's really why you can see figures like $11 billion in investments coming out in 1 year. Now, more than that, there's an interesting type of organization within the government it was called the Chief Scientist, and now it's called the Israel Innovative Authority, which gives about 100 startups a year. It gives at-risk grants to startups that are really at their development stages. So I think it's the Ministry of Finance has 10% of their budget is for this. It's given for this project, and there are startups that get tens of thousands of dollars just to really start their product, to really develop their product in order to try and encourage Israelis to develop their new products. Third, which is not less important, is that research shows, and I'm sure as that many of you might know, venture capital funds, generally when they look for entrepreneurs and they look to invest in new startups, they tend to actually only want people or entrepreneurs that have at least 2 or 3 failed startups in their resume. And not only that, but there are also research that shows that Israelis, in comparison to many other cultures throughout the world, fear less. It could be from military experience or just the corporate culture that really try and encourage people to make smart mistakes in order to learn from them. But really when you put them together, it just shows that Israelis aren't scared to fail in their startups, and so they fail quicker and they succeed faster. Fourthly, in Israel, obviously, as you know, technology is very important. And when you ask kids really what they want to do when they grow up, a lot of times they'll want to be either a pilot or maybe a lawyer or a doctor, because there are a lot of Jews in those professions, but a lot of kids will want to say they want to be an engineer. And the simple reason is that in the news, almost every day, you hear about a new Israeli technology that's gone worldwide and changed the way that we think about medicine or finance or insurance or the auto industry. Israeli technology is changing the world all the time, and kids want to aspire to be that. They want to change the world, and the way that Israelis change the world is through technology. So it really brings children to want to go into the profession from a very young age. And lastly, and which is almost most important here, is that the Israeli market is really, really small. So there's only a certain amount of testing that you can do within the Israeli market. So all startups, I would say 95% of startups, use Europe or the US as a platform to market their product. And actually recently we've been seeing that, we'll talk about it soon, but we've been seeing more and more startups actually going to Europe instead of the US. It started in the US because most of the investments at the beginning were coming from America, so it was only natural to go back. But it's definitely changing. And really these 5 pillars together, the military, the government assistance, the low fear of failure, the heroism of the entrepreneur, and the global thinking that startups have, really shape the entire technology ecosystem in Israel, which obviously reflects onto the Israeli ecosystem in its entirety. And consequently, the Israeli legal market is booming surrounding technology. Every time when people think Israel, when lawyers think about Israel, almost all of the relevant fields are technology, whether it's IP or litigation within technology or it's M&A, everything. It's very, very relevant. The only other fields that international firms really come into the market would be, there's a bit of property, there's a bit of international taxation and private clients. But other than that, it's very much so technology. But before we're going to talk about really how your firms can approach the market effectively, it's also important to try and map out the Israeli market itself to kind of learn about it and see where there are a few really important points that need to be understood before approaching the Israeli legal market. So the first is that there is an incredibly large attorney inflation in Israel. So on first thought, you see that Israel has 60,000 lawyers, or attorneys, more importantly. And generally speaking, I understand that in Finland there's only a few thousand, so that number seems quite high, but if you give that figure to an American, they'll say, oh, it's nothing. But then when you look at the numbers a bit more closely, for every 100,000 lawyers, there are 636 lawyers. Every 100,000 people, there's 636 lawyers. So when you compare it, it's double the amount of the next one, which is Greece, and more than triple the European average, which is absolutely ridiculous. So what we always like to try and explain is if a couple of buses went by, public buses, there would at least be a lawyer. If you were to go to a football match, there'd be a few dozen lawyers there. And the best part is if you were sitting in traffic and someone would run into you, by accident or on purpose, whatever, you can look out the window and ask for an attorney, and you'll be the one bargaining for the lowest price, because there will be so many there. And inevitably, the fees are very, very competitive. So in Israel, a managing partner of one of the top firms, whether it could be Herzog Fox Neyman, Meital, Gornitsky, Goss, any of the really big law firms, they make about as much as your senior associates, or in the best case, your junior partners. And on average, most Israeli firms, if the attorneys or the partners get $250 an hour, they're actually quite satisfied. And it becomes a bit of not an issue, but it's important to understand, because when you're coming from abroad and you see these numbers, a lot of firms like to run away at the beginning. And it's not that the Israelis work any less hard or they're less competent than their Israeli or European counterparts. They just really get paid less because that's what the market is about. And what's funny is that last year, Dun & Bradstreet, which is an Israeli legal and business researching company, put out their annual report and said the number one most complaint about clients of their law firms is that they're charging too much. So I guess it's a tough crowd, or I don't know, but that's just those are the numbers. But what Israeli firms have really started to do to try and deal with the fees, and the fact that especially when we're dealing with startups who don't have the money to even pay the Israeli fees, is they have some sort of deferral program. So the entrepreneur, just as he would go to an investor and make a pitch, they now come to the law firms first and make a pitch. And the law firms, based on that meeting really, and first impressions, try and see if it's worth investing. And they invest their time, which is ultimately money. And they don't actually charge the startups until later on when they have their first or second rounds of investment. There are a lot of issues with that type of program, but that seems to work best at the moment for the Israelis. Now, when you put those two things together, you get a really, really, really competitive market. And just an example, in the real estate market, not in technology, just to get some sort of comparison, lawyers scrape for the most minuscule margins, and there are a lot of lawyers that charge only 0.5% for transactional values on property, which is incredibly low for the European averages. And it's become some sort of situation where the Israeli law firms they're the buyers that no one wants to be in a seller's market. And it inevitably yields three results. One of which is consolidation, and you see Israeli firms merging all the time. Kind of what CMS did. You can't compare the massive amounts of lawyers, but generally speaking, the bigger firms are merging with the smaller ones to try and improve the niches that they are not as good at. And actually the only place we can see the opposite direction is in international tax, because there's a lot of work there. Second is there's a lot of cross-border activity, because the firms are trying to provide an all-in-one package for their clients. And lastly, Israeli firms are doing everything to try and be more unique than their competitors. So whether it's working with top-notch international law firms, or whether it's providing some sort of new service that is interesting and new for their clients. But most importantly, you can't really talk about Israel without talking about Israelis. I don't know, by show of hands, how many of you have been to Israel before? Okay, 4 out of 15 maybe? Yeah, so I don't know how much you encultured Israelis, but they're unique, I suppose. I was born and raised in the US, so I have a bit of an American side of me, so I'm not as Israeli as others, but it's important to try and get the feeling. So I don't know if you can recognize this picture here, but it's in Covent Garden. Yeah. I was just there, it's a really nice place. But regardless, just to try and give sort of an imagination. Picture 4 friends here standing by, watching this magician. And those 4 friends are an American, a Russian, a Chinese, and an Israeli. And a reporter comes up and it says, "Excuse me, can you please talk to me, give me your opinion on the meat shortage in London?" The American looks at him funny and says, "Well, what's a shortage?" The Russian looks at him funny and says, "What's meat?" The Chinese looks at him funny and says, "What's an opinion?" And the Israeli looks at him and says, "What's excuse me?" And just to give it another, to try and see it from a different perspective, I apologize, it's a bit blurry, but it's the best that I could find. In 1971, 2 researchers tried to cluster all of the cultures of the world together. You have, the Nordic area, Latin America, Near Eastern, and whatnot. But there were 4 different countries that they really just couldn't place anywhere. And those 4 countries being Brazil, India, Japan, and Israel. And one of the best ways to really show that is through the nickname of Israelis that they give themselves for those that were born and raised in Israel. It's called a sabra, which is a type of fruit. This is the fruit that grows on cacti in the desert. And really the main point is quite simple, that Israelis are quite rough around the edges, but they're very sweet inside. So the second that you crack the hard, pointy, with thorny shell, you really get to something incredible. My boss said it was kind of like a fig, and then I told him that you don't really know the difference, but Israelis are, anyway. So after really describing what the startup ecosystem is like and trying to describe what the Israeli legal market is like, I'm trying to see now where you can come in, where foreign law firms can acclimate and be involved in the Israeli market that is just bustling and changing all the time. So generally speaking, more and more international companies are coming into Israel, as I'm sure you may know, whether they're R&D centers, whether they're investors, whether they're big companies. And there are numerous ways that foreign law firms can actually be a part of that trend of coming into Israel. It's quite natural because all the people coming in need lawyers, but there are many other ways, specifically when we're regarding technology. So if you look at the chronological lifestyle, the life of a startup, which this entire segment that we're talking about on average is actually only 7 years. You start with the investors because startups need money, even though they may have the funding of the chief scientist, it's really only just to get their feet in the water. And these investors, like we said at the beginning, when we had $11 billion of foreign investments last year, all of those investing needs lawyers. And if we continue down the lifeline, like I said before, the markets that the Israeli startups are going to are mostly European or American. And when they go to those places, they need local counsel, whether it's employment, whether it's contractual law, whether it's all sorts of, it could be really a very wide spectrum of aspects that they need assistance on. Especially in Europe, where the Israeli law firms are a lot less, they're a lot less good at providing the relevant legal counsel. And lastly, it would be the buyers, because if the Israelis reach that exit that everyone is trying to get to, the question is who's buying them. And those who are buying them are from abroad almost always. And obviously those coming from abroad need legal counsel. But more than that, we've seen with a lot of legal services and professional services, we've seen a lot of research being done, and that law firms are slowly turning into more of a, not only legal counsel, but also business counsel to their clients. So when you know, when they completely trust you, and you say you should really be either in Israel, or you should be here and here and here, and that's just due to your basic knowledge of the Israeli market, we see that that has a lot more influence on clients than ever before. So all of these different aspects that we have here are generally work in a two-way street with Israeli firms. Because the competition is so fierce, Israelis are very scared of their clients. They keep them very, very close all the time. So generally it's never smart to work or to directly market on a wide basis the startups or the technology companies themselves, because most of the work comes from referrals from Israeli law firms, and if you're targeting their clients directly, they're not going to be so willing to help you later down the road, and it can really affect your business in the future. So what's also important to note is that foreign law firms have actually only been working in Israel since 2012, because there was a big legislation change. And in the 5 years that have passed, there are over 85 foreign firms active in Israel. And it's not that there are 85 firms that actually have an office in Israel. There are two at the moment. One is Greenberg Traurig, the American firm, and one is Asterson, a boutique UK firm.
So what's the name again?
Asterson?
Asterson.
Asterson. They deal a lot with...
It's up there.
Yes, this one.
Must be very boutique. I haven't heard of them.
Yeah, they're small and they're mainly based in Israel, but they do, but they only deal with UK law.
Yeah.
But a lot of firms you can see here, for instance, BLP, DLA Piper, Allen and Overy, Linklaters, they all have representatives that actually come out at least once a month, or that actually some that live there. Howard Kennedy just brought over someone. To try, they generally are more rainmakers to try and bring the clients in, because they only practice UK law. But still, it's a trend that more and more people are coming. But it's also important to note that when we look at all of the logos here, almost all of them are UK and US. But we're seeing that that's changing. That more and more European firms are coming in, but not only European. We see a lot of Latin American firms coming in. Last year, we do an annual foreign law firms conference. We had 400 attendees, over 80 representatives of foreign firms. We had a Latin American panel out of 6, because it was it's up and coming. And also the Chinese are coming into Israel with full force. They just bought, about a year ago, they bought Tnuva, one of Israel's biggest dairy companies. That was worth a lot of money. And they also, last year or 2 years ago, merged with Yenke, the second biggest Chinese firm, merged with a small Israeli boutique that deals with technology. So they're also coming. And slowly, because of that, and because of everything I was saying before about where startups are going now, we see more and more European firms coming into Israel, whether they're from Ireland, because a lot of startups use it as a platform to get to the US for tax reasons, whether it's Germany is really strong now, a lot of startups are going there, and so on and so forth, France, Spain. And so everyone's just trying to come in to get a piece of the pie, and we really think that it's only going to go and continue, that foreign firms from Europe are gonna be coming. And the reason why I'm specifically saying that is because you now have the advantage. Now is just the time where everyone is starting to come. So now is when you really have the advantage to try and make your mark. So after all of this information that I gave to you, and I hope it wasn't too much of a mouthful, we generally translate all of this information into really 3 main points of how you can convince your senior partners to send you to Israel the next time that you come, because I hope I was convincing enough that it's really worth it. first would be to branch out of what we call the usual suspects. And those are the law firms that you can find very easily on Legal 500, for instance. So you want to meet the best technology firms in Israel. You go onto Legal 500, and those are the ones that you send out meetings to. And those are really great firms, and they're very important. However, there are many other boutique firms that are really important to meet with as well, because they actually tend to refer more work out to foreign firms. So just as an example, actually the conference that I met Christopher at, one of the sponsors was Yuval Horn & Co. And because they were sponsoring an event with the IBA, and it sounds very big, I don't know. So most people asked me how, they thought that he actually had about 60 partners, because it sounded so good working with the IBA, but in reality he actually has 16 attorneys. So only about 5 partners, and he's one of the best technology firms in the country. So there are a lot more like that. Secondly, Israel, like many other countries, but even more so, is very based on interpersonal relations. So we really advise firms to come out at least once a year to rekindle relationships, to really meet the clients and see everyone, or else sometimes your business card gets stuck and dissipates in the high stack of other foreign business cards that are on the desks of the Israeli firms. And lastly, if, for instance, you were to go to a safari in Tanzania, and you would probably take a guide with you because it'd be quite dangerous. So we advise you take someone to navigate you through the market when you come, because it's not dangerous by any means, it's just difficult, I suppose. So really just to sum everything up in 3 words, like I said at the very beginning, is the Israeli ecosystem, and what makes it up, and who is there, and what kind of people are there. And the unique startup culture that Israel's created over the past 30 years is very different, and it really allows technology companies to flourish as much as possible. And it allows them and others to have a lot of opportunities, daily and weekly, that are really worth your time, because they really, as you can see, have yielded incredible results. So it's really just a matter of being able to catch the market at the right time and catch the company at the right time, like it is in technology and in startups. So really today is the time, like I was telling you before, that now is the time that European firms are actually only starting to come into Israel. And so it's the time to really get ahead of the game. But that's really all that I have for you, and I actually will be at the dinner today and everything, so I'd love to share my more experiences and what I know, as much as possible. So feel free, I don't know if you have any questions now, I'd love to ask. I'd love to respond. And that's it. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
No, great. I mean, I can sign everything you just said. For me, my client base is about 30% Israeli.
Okay.
They come to Switzerland.
Yeah.
I go at least 3 times per year. I go to Israel, but I'm not interested in the work in Israel. I want to have the Swiss cases,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't have any fee problems. They just know it's the
Yeah.
hourly fee is probably 4 times as much as an Israeli partner, but that's just the way it is,
Mm-hmm.
and it works.
Yeah, some of
There are
them.
a lot of private clients, and that's why private clients in Switzerland is connected. We
Mhm.
have a lot of investments in technology, so that's where we can connect.
Yeah.
And another, I think a very important thing which you did not mention, because that's probably your service, is I always go together with one of my partners from the law firm who is an Israeli.
Mhm.
Lifshitz, we go together because he speaks Hebrew, and
Yeah.
it's just a bit easier than
Yeah,
to
sure,
get into certain-
sure. We have.
That's your service, I suppose.
Yeah, it's whenever we have foreign firms coming in and do all sorts of events, I always ask my clients, do you know Hebrew? And generally they say no, or if they do, they only know a few words. So I try and teach them at least a few words just to open up the presentation. So a lot of times I just tell them, just start the presentation with Ani Yehudi, I'm Jewish. And it really just sets, or anything else, because it really just breaks the ice quite well. But
No, and I think very difficult clients, yes,
Mhm.
but they're fantastic. They never give up, especially in litigation.
Mhm.
So again, it's just
Yeah,
a principle, and that's why I
Mhm.
love Israeli clients.
yeah, we're.
They're demanding.
I've heard that a few times, to be honest.
I think another interesting thing, if you could say a word about this, is the number of people who practice in Israel, but who have very close ties to other countries.
Mhm.
Americans who move to Israel because they've done their
Sure.
Aliyah, French people who are moving more. So they're bringing with them
Mhm.
knowledge of these other countries outside of
Yeah.
Israel.
Yeah, you can. It's one of the most unique things about Israel. It's one of the most diverse countries in the world, I think, for at least just the small territory that we have, because Israelis are naturally very connected, like you said. I came from the U.S. Asterson, like you said, they're that I said here, they're all UK Jewish lawyers who decided that they wanted to move to Israel for ideological reasons, and then they opened up a firm because of it. And people are really well connected. And if you ask any standard Israeli where they're from, the conversation doesn't last any less than 5 minutes because, well, my dad's from here, my mom's from here, my grandparents came from there and emigrated to there. So it's very diverse and internationally oriented in general.
You're correct about the introductions. I had somebody from New York who introduced me or connected me with all big law firms in 2012.
Oh, really?
And otherwise I wouldn't be on Herzog's list.
Okay.
But he made the introductions, and that was important.
It's
So
good to
that's
hear.
what you do, so
You can come to the meetings and pitch as well.
sell your services.
Good. Yeah, it's we've seen a lot of I'll just there's like a nice story that we like to give. I won't say any names, but there was a big American firm that wanted to come and work in Israel, and they thought that their logo would be enough. And let's just say that they put in about $100,000 and didn't get any clients out of it. So it's we've seen that it's worked.
Are you able to identify any characteristics Israeli companies look for when they choose foreign counsel?
Okay, that's a good question actually. They really like to, Israelis tend to trust their intuition, and they trust their first impressions a lot of times. So especially when Europeans come, even the dress code in Israel, it's a lot less fancy, I suppose. Israelis, I mean, as you probably know, startups, you know, if you come to anything more than a jeans and t-shirt, you look at that a bit funny. Law firms, the top ones, you know, some of them come in ties, but only really if they have important meetings. But so really the first impression is really important, because they tend to go with their gut and people that are relatable to them, that speak to them very directly, and they're very, very open. That's just from a personal standpoint. Also, they will ask about the fees, and they will bargain you for your prices, so just be ready for it. But those are really the two main ones. Is really to be relatable and to provide some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? They just tend to look for people who are unique, and you have it a bit easy, because when you say I'm coming from Finland, it's quite unique to them already. Or they're saying I'm coming from Germany, and so because a lot of also Israeli firms, but also the clients themselves, they know a lot of Americans, and they know a lot of English people. I didn't really say this before, but it's part of. So it's not that they're sick of seeing them; they just know a lot of people. So, I mean, that's just how it is. No.
So I shouldn't buy my plane ticket straight away.
No, I'm just kidding. But it just makes your job a little harder than others. So the Israelis tend to really just go off their gut feeling, and that what does it. At least at the beginning, that's what really does it for them most times.
And geographically, the sector is really Tel Aviv, or are there
Only
other
Tel
parts?
Aviv.
It's really Tel Aviv.
Only Tel Aviv.
Aviv.
If there are some startups that maybe have their offices outside of Tel Aviv, but that's only because they don't have enough money to pay the rent space in Tel Aviv, which is actually why places like WeWork started. I don't know if you've heard of that they rent out office spaces, and it's an Israeli idea. And that really started, so there's a lot of Israeli startups there, but only Tel Aviv. We never tell, there are some firms that want to go to Jerusalem. We say just leave it for the vacationing, because Israeli firms that are in Jerusalem are generally not as internationally oriented than the ones in Tel Aviv.
So just picking up on some of the work that Anna mentioned that she does. So you've made the list of firms that you put up on the screen. Obviously, it's not all the firms that have been working in Israel, but I got a sense those are the firms that have been working there. A lot of them are quite large international players, and actually their charge-out rates or their project costs are typically a lot higher than the rates that people charge around this table. Do you think that might be a compelling reason in our favour, that actually we've got a lot of detailed expertise, but our price point is typically a lot lower than the Allenoveries, the Linklaters, the Dentons, the Simmons and Simmons?
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the best selling points, honestly. And also, a lot of firms, when they, at the beginning, when they targeted Israel, it was mostly the bigger firms that came because they had the budgets to come. And so they came and they tried to sell everything they had. And so you had a bunch of low-hanging fruit and no one really knew what to grab. So now more so than ever, the firms are coming in. The international ones are still trying to sell everything they have, but it's the reason why the more boutique European and also European in general firms are doing a bit better, because they come with their niche practices, and they're able, and it allows the Israeli firms to pick the low-hanging fruit, because that's the only one available, and it's really a lot easier for them to focus. So it's a relatively new trend that we've been seeing over the past year or so, that it's just hard to understand when you have a small startup that goes and you walk into CMS and you see that there are butlers and you see that there are people with like the same clothing and everything, so it's a bit repelling sometimes even.
As far as you know, is there any foreign firm that is, let's say, now willing to share the same kind of business model that many of the firms you mentioned before do? You mean that they don't want to be paid upfront and they accept a kind of deferred payment if it's a success? Just to know if some competitors are already aggressive, let's say, and they're sharing the same philosophy.
I haven't seen one firm that's done it. Most of the reactions I get are they crazy?
Yeah.
So no, not really.
It pays for that, yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, at the end, the law firms, they've gotten so much experience in trying to pick the various firms that they work for. So they're almost better than the venture capital funds that are coming in, because they see so many and they tend to know really what to pick now, and so they get their fair share later on in the game when things continue.
And how much deferred is the fee payment? The first round is how many months usually in that arena?
The first round generally comes within a year of the product itself, and then depending on how big it is, you have companies which their first rounds are only a few $1 million, and you have companies like Lemonade, which is relatively new. I don't know if you've heard about it. It deals with private insurance. Really interesting, and their first round of investment was $60 million. So you have quite a wide spread.
So which firms are the best pickers?
Which firms are the best pickers in Israel?
Yeah. So we should partner with the ones who do the great job.
Yeah.
With the ones who always
That's true. That's true.
Choose the best ones.
Yeah, I mean, most of the firms that have a very strong startup departments they have enough experience. So you have the big firms in Israel. All of the big firms in Israel have strong technology departments, and generally, as the firms get bigger, the more developed the startup companies are, because they can either pay their prices, or they need a lot more international work, or they just need a bigger firm. So you have all the bigger firms. You also have the more boutique ones who, I mean, it's just really quite a variety, and so it's not that the market is that big anyway. The most relevant law firms to international foreign firms that are coming in are only really, I would say there's, specifically regarding technology, there's maybe 30 firms that are relevant, from the biggest to the smallest, so it's not.
What is their average size?
That's a good question. The largest Israeli firm is Helsinki Fox-Neyman, if we're just looking at the numbers, and they have 298 employees. So I think they have about 250 lawyers, and then I think 100 partners maybe. But I would say on average, it would be about 100 lawyers, not partners.
Fee earner, yes.
Fee earners, yeah. Sure, so if there's, I mean, if you think of anything later, just let me know. We're always happy to.
You said that Israelis are direct and they like to talk about the money side. Maybe you should just tell us what the cost would be of us, just so people know,
Absolutely.
of engaging Robus to help with an introductory service.
Sure. So it's funny. I tried to be as less direct as possible because I was trying to, come when coming here. But I mean, generally speaking, it depends really on what you do. So if we were to have a series of introductional meetings for a few days, it actually doesn't cost that much because for us, we just call a few friends and we say, listen, there's someone that you really got to meet, and they tend to take the meeting. But if it's something a bit more large, like an event of some sort, then it takes we charge an hourly fee, so it just is a bit more, and then, but budget-wise, you can go from the best hotel on the beaches of Tel Aviv, or you can go to something a bit more budget-friendly, but also has really great services and facilities. So that's very depends on the budget that the firm is coming in with.
That's for the events.
Yeah, those are for the events.
Yeah.
And we also know how to speak with the media and market in other ways as well. But we've just seen that those are the services that most, upon engaging with the market for the first few times, those are the type of things that tend to work.
Doing an event.
Doing an event
Yeah.
and doing introductory meetings.
But you said the introductory meetings, there isn't really much cost to that?
Yeah, because we charge on an hourly rate, so
Right. Okay.
it doesn't take us that many hours, so that's why it's cheaper.
And would you ever do an arrangement whereby you got a percentage of revenue that was generated out of your activities?
No,
Okay.
no. And it's
Trying
actually
to make a deferred deal.
No,
Like a payment deal.
deferment was
It's that's bugging.
the deferment was going to come next.
Yeah.
So not the commission rate. Yeah.
No, it's actually most, on average, most of our clients really tend to work with us only once.
Yeah.
Not because, I mean, we tend to do, I would think we do a good work, but we just try and open the doors and then you take the lead from there. We're not,
Should maybe find the ideal Israeli Ecomlex member for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Christopher said something.
That was the first discussion I had with Tamar was about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was many, we talked about it as well, and I think there are many firms that would be very interested.
Really?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Many good boutique
Yeah.
Tel Aviv-based technology firms.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. No, there are a good amount of those, so.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Tamara, of course, I will carry out my web search, but is there any information source to understand better what are each one of the jurisdictions for the outbound investment from Israel that can be more of interest for an Israeli company? US is first, of course.
In terms of keeping the schedule,
Yes.
this is the last question, and then we'll
Yes.
ask Tamar later on during the evening. So
Good point.
Google
Minister of
does a
Foreign
really
Affairs,
great job.
Minister of, what I mean, he's the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs of Economy or something. Are those data available?
Not something that I've come across,
Okay.
to be honest, and generally it's not material that's in English, ironically. However, I can make sure to, we have a few articles that we've either sent out or that we've had that I can make sure that can be sent with the presentation afterward. But I tend to use Google. It helps me. But something a bit more, a bit better than that, there's really nothing I've come across.
Because there are so many representatives of many European jurisdictions, I suppose what Diego's trying to get at is which are the other, is the Czech Republic a hot place
Yeah.
at the
Oh,
moment,
okay.
or is Sweden a place where
Mhm.
they
Yes,
always
it's
want to
probably
go?
say that, probably Switzerland for investment
Yeah.
and,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Germany and of course US, UK,
Yeah.
top,
Yeah.
okay. this
Yeah,
stuff.
it varies.
What about Italy, Czech Republic or
Mhm.
Finland and so on?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, Ireland tax all the time. Czech Republic, for example, is a lot of property investment and private clients. Germany has a lot of technology, obviously, as does the UK. Each place kind of has their own. Yeah, but that's just from experience. It's not something that like a standard report. Maybe I'll write something about it. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
There you go.
For the golden visa.
Sorry?
Portugal for a golden visa.
Yeah.
We have a few also.
Okay. Yeah. So
Because they want to have, because they do not need any visa to come to Europe,
uh-huh.
but they prefer to have also, being considered resident
Yeah.
in the EU and Schengen areas. So
Yeah.
sometimes that's
Yeah, a lot of people, Israelis also try and use it in order to do business with the Middle East, because having an Israeli passport is very limiting, to Dubai especially and such. So.
Okay, thank you. I think we need to close this discussion in order we have other guests and we need to accommodate for the schedule. So, and we know Tamar will be here for the evening and we can continue those discussions. So, Harry and Mika, can you please come? And please, hey, take the opportunity, fill your cups of coffee, take whatever you have there on the other. There are some sweet things and yeah. Yes.
Can you send me the presentation? Sure, with pleasure. Contact business development.
What's your